I'm Richard.
And I'm Will.
And together we're
the
Irreverent Nerds.
Bum, bum, bum.
Nerds. We would love to find out who is on the other side of the microphone. There are multiple options by which you can connect with us. Our Instagram handle is @irreverent_nerds. We are on Facebook and YouTube as simply the Irreverent Nerds. Makes sense, right? And of course, we are on your podcast app. If you listen on Spotify, scroll down and you will see a question. What did you think of this episode? We welcome your feedback. We post episode-specific polls and questions from time to time on Spotify, so please feel free to jump in there and give us your 2 cents. All right, nerds, I've talked enough. Let's get back to this week's episode. Nerds. We are here. I don't know why I'm talking in German, but we are here to talk about a Stephen King film. I don't think he's German, but for some reason German came to my mind. I don't know why. Do you know why, Will? Do you understand the depths of Richard yet? After 20 years. Oh.
No hablo inglés. I don't have any impressive.
I'm still a mystery. Just as I planned. No. That was Batman, by the way. Of course.
Was that Batman?
He wants to always be a mystery on some level. He doesn't. Sadly, this is somewhat true of me. He doesn't let you get too close. Close enough, but not too close.
Really? I feel like you're one of my most openest friends.
No.
No, I'm not open.
Oh, well, that may be true. I don't hang out with the other friends enough to know. No, I've definitely opened up more over the year. I'm the kind of person that I only open up with a few select clips. I either do it in public or I do it with just a few close people. I'm like hot or cold or whatever, one extreme or the other. I guess there's only like a few really close friends, or it's out in public for everyone.
Yes, no.
Yeah, trying to find a healthier balance between the two. I'm not sharing anywhere near as much in public as I did a couple of years ago. I kind of went through a phase in my middle age. Anyway, enough about me. Why are we here, William? I mean, like,
that is a deep philosophical question, Richard, and I'm just not certain if we're able to handle it right now.
Oh man, well this movie that we chose for this week, man, I was like, this might be too serious for the Irreverent Nerds. Can we be irreverent? Can we make fun of this at all? Like, and being a couple days removed from watching it now, I'm like, okay, I feel like I can maybe make a few jokes now, but that first night after I finished it, I was like, I cannot joke about this ever.
I can make fun of it.
So, I mean, obviously, if you clicked on this, you know where why do we even tell people the title after they've already clicked on the episode? Why do I do that?
We should purposely mislead them by...
I know why. Here's a good reason. If they're listening to our podcast and they just let it run, from episode to episode, and they're driving somewhere, it's safer for them just to hear what we're talking about. They don't have to look down at their phone and see what the next episode's about. So then that's why we do it. Well, I just came up with that. All this time I had no reason other than my brain, and somewhere in there I bet my brain knew that and was like, They need to hear it so they don't have to check their phones manually, because that's dangerous when you're driving. And by the way,
yes.
Don't text when you drive. Don't do that.
Hey, look, watch out. I'm kidding.
Speaking of, oh man. So I always have loved a good like radio drama, like back in the 90s.
We're going to get sued now. They cause someone to have a right.
Well, there is actually a new, it's a company that, as far as I know at this point, exclusively makes podcast audio dramas. And these are really well produced. Like mainstream actors are headlining and producing these things along with the company. And its name is Q Code, including, they've even produced one for Rhett and Link, which I don't know if you know who Rhett and Link are, but like Good Mythical Morning and like Ear Biscuits and Mythical, they into all of that. Like they actually joined forces with Q Code to produce a story as well. But these are done with, it's almost like 360 sound for your ears, and somehow they achieve it even if you're just wearing regular stereo headphones. Somehow it sounds like if you were in a theater and you had surround sound and you hear something behind you, somehow they do that with headphones. I don't know how, but somehow. Spatial audio is what it's called. But they do warn you at the beginning of every episode, if you're driving a vehicle or walking around, it may sound like things are coming behind you or beside you, so beware.
So, do you think that spatial audio would have enhanced your viewing of this movie?
Ooh, would have made it a heck of a lot creepier. And it was already creepy enough as it was, but yeah, that would have made it creepier. Yeah, because you could hear something coming from behind you, and it legit, like there's been a few times when I've been listening to Q Code dramas. Plug for them, by the way. And hey, guys, if you ever need an extra voice actor, let me know.
Definitely better than me.
I can be an extra, man number 3 or something, who has like two lines, but hey, I'll get in there. Yeah, you need somebody, let me know. I'm down.
I love man number 3's performance. It was great.
That's right. Gotta get my foot in somewhere that would be totally fun. Like, there's a lot of people, like, fanboys such as ourselves that produce their own, and they act in their own stories, they write them, and like, and in some cases I've seen other people actually dramatize graphic novels, like DC or Marvel graphic novels, so they've done their own fan dramatization, and some are pretty decent, like not up to the level of Q Code because these guys are like legit professionals, but still, it's like that had to be fun. Like a lot of work, but fun. Maybe someday. That's another project for another time. we gotta keep up with this podcast first. Anyway, so we're here to talk about the 2007 Stephen King film, or maybe it's more fair to say Frank Darabont film, because he's the director and he co-wrote the screenplay with Stephen King. Right. But it's based on a Stephen King novella, and that is 2007's The Mist. Had you heard of this film before I mentioned it for this week's episode?
I have not. I mean, I've definitely heard of Stephen King and a bunch of his more famous works, but I haven't heard of this work before.
Now, I have not read the novella, but I had heard about this movie off and on over the years, and I think they, for some odd reason, decided to remake it or make it again a few years back, and I didn't hear positive things about that, but I was unaware, I think, of the 2007 version. I don't know if I'd ever even seen a trailer for it. It did release in theaters, apparently. But in preparation for Horror Month, we're still trying to follow our normal layout where we have a sci-fi episode first, so I was trying to find a good sci-fi horror movie for us to review. And this one came up on, I think, 2 or 3 different lists of like top 10 or 20. I think there's even some top 50 lists out there of sci-fi horror films. And this one came up several times. So the more I looked at it, I was like, this sounds interesting. And I like Stephen King. And also, this was free as well. It was streaming on Pluto TV. And
I didn't know that, so I rented it.
Yeah.
It's like we looked for it on Pluto TV, but we couldn't find it.
Huh, really? Oh, so you had Pluto TV?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was it's in the on-demand section. You had to search for it in the on-demand section, I think.
I was busy doing something, and my wife, Mandy, was searching all the streaming platforms, and I kept telling her, I can't remember if it's on Pluto or if it's on Tubi.
Oh, yeah, Tubi and Pluto. Those are the 2 free ones, I think.
Yeah, but go look at those, and she didn't find them, and oh well.
Yeah, plug for Pluto TV, by the way. If you're not already aware of it, it's owned. It's run by like CBS Paramount, but they have all kinds of stuff. It's like free cable almost. There's like all kinds of channels with different shows. They have if you have kids, they have a Dora the Explorer channel.
I love the Godzilla channel.
Is there a Godzilla channel?
Yeah.
Nice. And I think my favorite thing about it is they have a Star Trek The Next Generation channel. Like literally 24/7, it's playing Star Trek The Next Generation episodes. But they also have a lot of good on-demand movies, of which this is one. The Mist. So this is where I watched it, and we'll rent it an HD version of it.
And I'm pretty certain I saw the same.
It wasn't the black and white one, was it?
No.
Okay. So apparently that's on like the 2-disc DVD set that released. They had a black and white version of the film, which that would have been interesting. Apparently the filmmakers wanted to produce it in black and white originally, or release it in black and white, and I guess that got shot down by the studio execs, but they were able to apparently put it on the DVD. So I kind of want to, if I ever rewatch it, I think I'll rewatch it in black and white, because that just sounds cool. I like some like good old classic black and white horror movies or suspense movies, you know. But
I was aware the black and white movie did exist, though. I found that on Vudu before I went to YouTube.
Oh, so they have it available for rent too?
Yeah, you can watch the black and white version on Vudu.
Nice. Okay. I'll have to keep that in mind. Like, I imagine it would be, although I don't know, it may or may not be cheaper to get the DVD set at McKay's or something, if they have it. But it depends. Like, there's some random movies will be more expensive, and others are like 95 cents. Like, I got the entire BBC Planet Earth series on Blu-ray for 95 cents.
Nice.
I was like, what? This has no business being 95 cents. It's like, this is amazing television. I mean, David Attenborough, need I say more? David Attenborough. You know who that is, right? David Attenborough.
No. I'm just laughing.
Have you seen the...
if I did know.
You've probably heard his voice on a nature program. He's that one... So he's Richard Attenborough's brother. You know, Richard Attenborough from Jurassic Park. So it's his brother.
Which one is that?
David. You know, Mr. Hammond. He plays Mr. Hammond.
Cool.
So his brother David has been doing nature documentaries, I think, since like the 60s or 70s. He's in his 80s now. It's still going, like still at least doing the narration. I don't know if he gets out in the field much now in his 80s, but like he still does narration for like Netflix. Anyway, I'm rambling. So let's get back on point here. We're here to talk about The Mist. So I'm going to give just a little summary blurb about it, and then we're gonna dive in and read a summary of the plot, as we normally do, and then we're just gonna talk about all the many themes. And there's some deep stuff in this, and it's a hard watch, but a fascinating and enthralling watch. Highly recommend it. Like, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm giving this like 4.5 stars. This is a really well done movie. Highly recommend it. So, anyway, to the point. So, the 2007 Frank Darabont film, The Mist, is based on a novella written by the eponymous horror author Stephen King. And unlike some other film adaptations of his work, this one does not disappoint. Now, there have been a few duds in the many, many adaptations of his work, I must say. But this one does not disappoint, in my opinion. The story centers around a small group of people living in southeastern Maine who are confronted with a series of horrible choices when an eerie mist descends upon their small town. The mist brings with it some terrifying creatures whose origin is unknown to both the characters and the viewers for most of the film. As the body count slowly rises, the fear and anxiety of this small group of humans who have holed up in a grocery store for protection steadily rises. These emotions are both fed upon and fed by a local religious fanatic, Mrs. Carmody. Over the course of 2 harrowing days, she effectively becomes a cult leader for a growing number of the people trapped in the grocery store. Thus is the stage set for some deep and dark exploration of the nature of humans and our behaviors during crisis situations.
Dun, dun, dun.
So before we get too deep into the themes and discussion of the same, we are going to go through the plot so you kind of know what we're talking about with this film. So, Will, why don't you start us off with the plot rating here?
Although a monster movie, the central theme...
Wait. Plot.
Oh, I'm on the wrong part.
It's okay. We'll get there.
A severe thunderstorm strikes Brighton, Maine, causing a tree to fall into the lakeside home of artist David Drayton, his wife Stephanie, and their 8-year-old son Billy. While surveying the damage, the next morning, they notice a thick mist advancing over the lake.
Oh man, that just made me think of The Simpsons. I surveyed the damage. You know, the hillbilly from the...
Yeah.
What's his character's name? I can't think of it. Cletus?
Cletus. That's it.
Cletus. Anyway, sorry. Continue.
Causing a tree to fall into the lakeside home of artist David Drayton, his wife Stephanie, and their 8-year-old son Billy. While surveying the damage the next morning, they notice a thick mist advancing over the lake. David and Billy leave for the town with their neighbor Brent Norton to buy supplies. From inside the supermarket, they watch police cars speed down the street. A terrified local Dan Miller runs into the store and warns of a danger lurking in the mist. As a silver alert siren sounds, store managers Ollie Weeks and Bud Brown close off the supermarket and the mist envelops the store. One woman leaves to go home to her children.
Against David's advice, bagger Norm starts to go outside to fix the store's emergency generator, but he is grabbed by a tentacled creature and dragged into the mist. David and Ollie direct the customers to barricade the storefront windows. Mrs. Carmody, a religious fanatic, begins preaching about an impending Armageddon. Brent disbelieves the dangers of the mist and leaves the store with a small group to seek outside help. His group is attacked by an unseen force and, presumably, killed.
David forms connections with several people in the store, including Amanda Dunphy and Irene Repler, 2 teachers who came into conflict with Carmody over her religious take on the ongoing disaster. Amanda carries a revolver in her purse and gives it to Ollie, who is a former regional shooting champion. As night falls, enormous flying insects attracted to the light swarm to the store windows and are preyed on by pterodactyl-like creatures. One of the predators smashes a window, allowing both species inside. In the ensuing panic, 2 people are killed while another receives fatal burns while attempting to incinerate the insects. Meanwhile, Carmody is miraculously spared from an insect, which convinces her to proselytize more fervently and gain followers among the survivors.
A small group, led by David, goes to the neighboring pharmacy in search of medical supplies, but is attacked by giant spiders that kill 2 men, forcing them to retreat. Carmody, who had opposed the expedition, uses this failure to increase her influence by offering protection from divine wrath to new converts. The next day, following the suicides of 2 soldiers from the local military base, a 3rd soldier, Jessup, reveals that a government project to discover other dimensions was underway at the base, and that scientists accidentally opened a doorway into the creature's habitat. Angered and vengeful, Carmody's followers beat, stab, then offer Jessup as a sacrifice and expel him from the supermarket. Outside, he is immediately devoured by a giant, praying mantis-like creature.
As David and his group prepare to leave the store the next morning, they are stopped by Carmody, who demands that Billy and Amanda be made the next sacrifices to appease the monsters. As the crowd descends, however, Ollie shoots and kills Carmody. Traumatized and returning to their senses, her followers stand down and allow David's group to leave. As the group makes its way through the parking lot, Ollie is devoured by the praying mantis-like creature, while 2 others, Myron and Ambrose, are killed by the spider creatures from the pharmacy. Bud runs back to the store and is allowed back inside. David, Billy, Dan, Amanda, and Irene reach David's car and leave.
And I'm going to pause right there because the ending is so powerful to this film that I don't want to spoil it just yet. So we're going to end the plot right there. A little bit of a cliffhanger for you. But if you are one of those who's listening to this who just wants to hear about the movie and not necessarily watch it, I want to hold you in suspense a bit because, trust me, it's worth it. The ending, very powerful. And but we will talk about it before the episode's over. Don't worry. So there's quite a few cast here, so we'll talk about them real quick. So we got Thomas Jane as David Drayton, a painter who ends up trapped in the supermarket with his son Billy. We have Marcia Gray Harden as Mrs. Carmody, a religious fanatic who believes the mist to be the wrath of God. Laurie Holden as Amanda Dunphy, a new teacher at the local school. She carries a Colt revolver with her at all times. Andre Brower plays Brent Norton, a big city attorney and David's neighbor. Toby Jones plays Ollie Weeks, the supermarket's assistant manager who's experienced with guns. And I think we'll stop for now on that. There's quite a few people in the cast, but those are some of the headliners, some of the first that you would see if you were to look this up on IMDb. And we'll pause on that for now.
Didn't the actor playing Ollie play in the Marvel MCU?
Yes, yeah,
I thought so.
He played the Red Skull's right hand.
Yeah.
And I cannot remember the professor. He's a professor, but I can't remember his name. Didn't he just get called Professor all the time by the Red Skull?
I don't remember.
Professor.
Professor. He turns into the. He turns into another supervillain that has a monitor for a head.
Well, I mean, it's basically his scientific intelligence uploaded to a computer, right? More or less.
That was the more realistic version they used in the MCU.
Ah, so it's different in the comics.
Yeah, he's a robot with a monitor for a head.
Wait, that's not the one from Ant-Man later, is it?
No, that was MODOK. That was
MODOK.
different.
Very different. Okay.
No, but he does appear in What If, the animated series. Anyway, that's off topic.
Yeah, I've always liked Toby Jones. Like he's been in a lot of films. I've seen him in a number of different things over the years. And I believe won an Oscar for playing. Now I know I'm gonna get this wrong. Oh wow, I'm having to scroll way down because he's got like so many. Darn, what is it? Truman Capote. So he plays Truman Capote in the film Infamous, and I believe he won an Oscar for that back in 2006. And yeah, I think the first thing I saw him in there was Amazing Grace from 2006. He plays a pretty despicable landowner who owns slaves, and he doesn't have a huge part in the movie, but he makes an impression. And he was in that just the year before this, The Mist. So yeah, he's been in quite a number of things over the years. Yeah, including the first two Captain America films, as you mentioned. So, I guess I'm trying to think where to start. So maybe talk a little bit about the emotional impact of the film. Save the ending, like,
right?
But the rest of the film, like, was it a slow burn for you? Like, I mean, I think it's meant to be, but like, how did you process or receive it as you were watching? Like,
well, I was very interested in the mystery of the monsters or monster, as we're not certain how many there are starting out. I really liked it. I think that I perceived the film or understood or received the film a little differently than you. Have you seen a lot of horror movies, by the way?
I've seen a few. Like, I'm not a huge horror fan, like, but I do like films like this. I don't mind the gore if there's a really deep story behind it with characters that are well written. So I don't mind, but if a horror movie is just like a lot of jump scares and gory mess and stuff,
yeah,
I don't care for that so much.
No.
But yeah, I've seen quite a few over the years.
I mean, I'm not big on horror films, but I've seen quite a few. In my childhood, I remember being introduced to Friday the 13th.
I've not seen that yet.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah, I know that. I know.
I don't remember which ones I have seen. I know I have not seen Jason Goes to Hell, or that time Jason was anchored under the water or went to New York. I know that much. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is I'm somewhat desensitized to the... I didn't really think this film was that bad, gore-wise.
Yeah, I've seen worse.
Yeah. But the movie didn't really scare me. I really enjoyed the science fiction monster aspect of the film. That had me interested. Um, the CGI I felt was a little, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but the CGI could have been just a teeny bit better. But the more you watched it, the less you noticed it.
Yeah, it was pretty solid for, I guess, for 2007.
Yeah,
Not top of the line necessarily, but good enough. I thought it was solid.
um, I felt like it didn't have the budget of some horror movies, but it was definitely better than '80s horror movies.
Yeah, I think it only had, if I remember correctly, like an $18 million budget.
Right.
Which I imagine they spent majority of that on the cast, because it has a big ensemble cast.
Exactly, and that's where the movie really shines. The performances were amazing.
I agree. Like, very, very well done. Thomas Jane obviously shines as David Drayton in I guess what you call the lead role. He's definitely one of the. We're introduced to his character first. He's the very first one in the film, and we learn that he's a painter. And yeah, I couldn't tell. Like, he paints. So he paints. Was it movie posters? Like, rather than just being put together with like Adobe Photoshop or something, he actually hand paints them for a living. We find out, and like as the film opens, he's painting what's either like a Clint Eastwood movie, or it's meant to be The Gunslinger, which at that point, which is another Stephen King book, at that point had not been made into a film. Yeah, very unfortunately. Yeah, I'm not going to go into that. Like, the Dark Tower series got a very unpopular treatment, which had some excellent actors in it. I mean, Matthew McConaughey and Idris Elba, but it bombed at the box office.
Wasn't The Dark Tower also a comic book series?
Yeah, I believe they have done graphic novel adaptations, but it was a novels first.
Oh, okay.
And as Stephen King's, most of his novels are very long, and I think the way he's put it, it's like it's meant to be his magnum opus, his Lord of the Rings, if you will.
Oh.
It's a long story, and then he's since then has tied it into a number of his other. I think I've heard that he somehow ties it into all of his novels. That somehow they're supposed to be all in an interconnected universe.
I've always wondered about that.
I've heard. But anyway, that's just a little trivia tidbit, I guess. But yeah, maybe it was like his vision of Clint Eastwood as the gunslinger, which I think would have been great, actually, had they made which I suppose they still could before the man dies. But yeah, it might be a little too old for it now. Although he did play a drug mule a few years back. He directed the movie himself, but he plays a 90-year-old drug mule. He's like getting in fights and like outrunning people in his pickup truck and stuff like that.
I was about to say outrunning people at 90
in his truck. Although Clint Eastwood might still be able to outrun a few people, certainly people his age, I would imagine. But anyway, we were talking about the performances. I thought the youngest performer, who plays David Drayton's son, and let's see, I cannot find the son's name right now. Is it Billy? I want to say it was Billy.
Yeah, the son's name is Billy.
Yeah, Billy. So I thought he did an excellent job. Brought a lot of. He was able to emote quite powerfully. Yeah, Billy Drayton, played by Nathan Gamble. Yeah, that performance was quite powerful, which I think always is attributed as well to the director. Like, as a director, if you can draw a powerful performance from one of your young actors, obviously they still have to have the talent, but some directors are good at that and some are not. And yeah, Frank Darabont. I don't think he's dealt with kids too often. Although I've not seen most of the Walking Dead series, so I can't say how many kids pop up in that. But yeah, he did a good job, I thought.
Now, the actor that plays Jessup, the one of the army boys, I've been meaning to ask you. He looks familiar to me. I wonder if he's the same guy who later played Plastic Man on The Flash, the TV series.
That I don't know, but he makes his way around genre TV and movies, so it wouldn't surprise me necessarily. But his name's Sam Witwer, and I think prior to this, he was best known for a run on Battlestar Galactica, like the newer series. He was in that, and he also did the modeling and the acting for the main character in the Force Unleashed video games. So you might have seen him in the trailers or whatever,
okay.
or if you ever played it. Like you can tell it's him. Like they modeled his face and everything.
I had the first one on the Wii, but I'm gotta say, other than the Wii controls, that was an ugly version of that game.
Yeah, those kind of games don't translate particularly well to the Wii, unfortunately. No. Yeah, and I say that as someone who owns one currently, and although I haven't bothered to get one of those types of games at this point, I'm stick more to Mario and the like.
Things actually made for the Wii.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, he has a pretty pivotal role in the film, and I thought he did a good job. And I guess that kind of leads into one of the main themes, like the way his character is treated in kind of, well, I guess towards the end of his, like as we mentioned in the plot already, he does get killed, but that is the culmination of some tensions that have been building up for more than probably close to half the movie at that point. And it kind of, and like even some of the characters within the movie, they're like they could see it coming, but it still happens at the end of the day, which is really sad. To me, it's probably I think it might be the most frightening scene in the film, personally. Like,
oh, really?
I think what the humans do is, to me, was scarier, actually, than the creatures in the mist themselves. Like, in a lot of ways, which may have been some of Stephen King's intent, because this really is, I felt, an exploration of human nature and how humans might behave in crisis situations, and they explore how different elements, like different political beliefs or different religious beliefs, may affect that, and even just how people interact with fear during crisis situations.
Absolutely.
But yeah, Sam Witwer's character Jessup is an unfortunate victim of some of that. And yeah, how did you? I guess we'll get into some of the themes now. Like, did you? Granted, neither you nor I have been in that type of crisis situation. Obviously not. Creatures from, oh, by the way, spoiler warning, creatures from another dimension. We haven't experienced that, obviously, but even just like a situation like that, like say if you'd been in a war zone or something where your life is threatened, but you're maybe a civilian and you're kind of on the edges of it and trying to avoid getting killed, like you or I think it's fair to say, unless you've experienced something I don't know about, we've not been in that situation.
No.
So we can only imagine what that might be like. But did you feel like it had a balanced or I guess maybe to put it another way, do you feel like what the characters did was in line with what humans might do in that situation, how they might actually act in situations like that?
Well, there was a great philosophical, very short but great philosophical conversation about this within the film, and I have to say that I'm a little mixture of both perspectives. I have lower faith in humanity, but I basically think that most human beings are civil and decent, or at least I expect them to be civil and decent for the most part. But do I have faith that they're going to drive their car in a way that's not going to necessarily cause me to have a wreck? No. That's why I stop at every green light and look both ways. But I think that the film did a great job in exploring what panicked um, what's the word I'm looking for? It's on the top of my tongue. They were desperate. What panic
Yeah.
desperate human beings are capable of. I think it's sad that they so easily gave in to a cult leader.
Yeah,
But,
that happened pretty quick. In fact, one of the
yeah.
characters actually observes that. She's like, wow, 2 days. It only took 2 days.
Yeah.
Like,
I think there's a reason for that within the framework of the film.
yeah, it obviously, to what do you feel like did that, even the timeline, given the other context, the context in which it was occurring, did that feel like, oh wow, yeah, that could happen, at least with some people who might be predisposed to that kind of influence, I guess.
Well, I think what drove them to so quickly come to accept this Lady Carmody's preaching was that something was happening outside that was beyond their belief, and it was shaking their understanding of reality. So they were ready to believe, because their view of reality had been so broken and shattered. They were ready to say, okay, maybe this is possible.
Yeah, I think like there's kind of a, like, leading up to this, like, it's interesting, like some of the characters, like David Drayton, he kind of brings it up. There's a meeting of, like, the quote unquote more reasonable people, at least the people that don't get swept up in the religious fervor. There's a small group of maybe 8 or so people that don't get swept up in that aspect. Now, it doesn't mean they're free from making bad decisions themselves, but at least that aspect of the behavior within the grocery store. But they, David's like, I can see this coming with Mrs. Carmody. He's like, if this gets worse, she might start convincing more people of her perspective. And then that kind of leads into, I think you were referencing this, kind of leads into a discussion of the nature of humanity in crisis situations. And the teacher, Amanda Dunphy, says, expresses her belief that humans are basically good. That, I think she says, like, we're in a civilized society, for God's sake, I think she says, or something along those lines. And she's pretty much alone in that perspective. The other people are more, I don't know if pragmatic's the right word, but for instance, I think it's David Drayton who says, like, people will turn to anyone who offers a solution during a time of crisis. He says something along those lines.
Or
and then,
anything.
Yeah, potentially. And then Amanda and Dan, well, the three of them kind of have a back and forth. And Amanda, like, Dan says something similar, maybe even a little more cynical, of like, people are just going to turn on one another, in this situation, or they're just going to be looking. And Amanda asks him, she says, you don't have much faith in humanity, do you? And Dan says, none whatsoever. Amanda says, I can't accept that. People are basically good, decent. Like, my God, David, we're a civilized society.
She cried and shed a tear.
Yeah, no, she was pretty upset, and, like, or just feeling very passionately about it. And David says, sure, as long as the machines are working and you can dial 911, but you take those things away, you throw people in the dark, you scare the shit out of them, no more rules.
And I think that's the heart of what Stephen King was getting at with his story. I don't really think it was about monsters. I think it was about people.
I agree. The monsters were kind of just a mysterious outside force, an outside pressure that kind of, in a sense, was the source of the growing conflict. Maybe not the source of it, but it was an outside pressure. It drove the conflict, I guess, within the film, amongst the humans. So, I guess the question, like, and I know we have some differences philosophically, but, like, do you feel that they're right about that humans are that will that easily go down that path in situations like that?
Realistically, I don't really know. It depends. For one thing, it depends on the people. I don't know. I think I would be shocked personally to see just how fast that things could really go downhill. I don't have any exact examples, but I remember that just a few short years ago there were riots. Um, Police brutality led to people rioting in the streets and burning down. And I don't want to get political right now. I really don't.
I mean,
but burning down businesses.
You're just talking
of
about what
innocent
happened,
people.
like that
Yeah.
objectively happened, whether you agree
Yeah.
with the different perspectives at play or not. People did that.
Yeah.
Like it objectively happened.
Yeah, and I completely get and understand their anger. But they burnt down. Some of the protesters burnt down the businesses of innocent people. It had nothing to do with what happened or the police.
Yeah, that was
And-
unfortunate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I would probably be like Amanda. I would be in disbelief about how fast, quickly, and low some people could really get. I mean, I talked about not having much faith in humanity, but I have some. I do. And maybe that's because I've never been in the situation to really see just. I've never really seen the ugly underbelly of humanity.
Yeah.
I'm still somewhat naive.
Or sheltered.
Sheltered.
Or
yes.
yeah, similar myself. Like I have not, I've been hurt by people, but yeah, there's, I've heard stories of so much worse, and I have not experienced. And I think what's interesting, like, I haven't finished it yet, but there's a book I started, maybe a year or two ago. It's called I may be getting the title wrong, but A Year Spent in Hell, I think, and there's the author. She spent 10 years researching and studying how humans behave during crisis situations. And at least she found, like, at least during natural disasters and the like, that people more often than not banded together and helped one another. And I was just thinking about that. I do feel like there is probably a distinction between something that's relatively impersonal, like a natural disaster, like a tsunami. I mean, you could still blame God for it, I guess. So in some sense, it might be personal, but it's not personal in the sense of, like, there's a group of humans meeting this out against you. It's like, no, this was a tsunami. This is beyond any human's control, or this was an earthquake, or I do feel like there's probably a distinction between that and then what you mentioned with the riots were a response to human misbehavior, the misbehavior of certain policemen, who had committed just unnecessary acts of violence. They had gone too far and had done it repeatedly, over the decades, and just a lot of build-up tension that certainly wasn't helped by the media. The media tends to flame these things and make them worse at times. But there were some legitimate wrongs that happened and legitimate grievances. So it does seem like there may be a difference between how humans might react to wrongs and harms that are done by other people versus maybe a natural disaster. So I do think that may play a part or have a difference. And you see that a bit in the film itself, where, like, once it comes to light that the military is responsible, just like, or at least was involved. They were there assisting the scientists in opening this window, what they thought was going to be just a window where they could observe other dimensions, and ended up, becoming a door where these creatures and the mist as well from another dimension was able to enter ours, or the dimension of the story. But once that came to light, which by the way, David Drayton was responsible in a lot of ways for bringing that to light and making, in some sense, I mean, he was angry, and rightfully so, and demanded to know the answers from Jessup and his military companions. But then it becomes the catalyst that just, in a sense, brings things to a fever pitch with the, like, at this point, they just had like kind of a generic, like, the evils of mankind are responsible for this. It's the judgment of God. But it's very vague. But now it's like, oh, scientists, the military, and their hubris. Now there's a lightning rod for the anger and the fear, I think, which even in the character Mrs. Carmody, I like Marcia Gray Hayden knocked it out of the park with this. Like, if she wasn't nominated for some kind of award, she should have been. Like, excellent performance.
Oh yeah.
Like, oh man, her character is horrible. So horrible. Like, you want her you want her to die. Like, you want her to die. Like, she's harming people. But I like the fact, and obviously the director and writers are responsible for this as well, but Marcia nailed it in her performance. They show that she's just as terrified as everybody else. But unfortunately, the way she dealt with her fear, I think as a way of dealing with it or controlling, she then sought to control other people.
Joker here. I'd like to take a moment to talk to you about the Irreverent Nerds. They're sitting here in my hideout, all tied up. So they can't say this themselves, but they would like you to know that there are multiple options by which you can connect with them. Their Instagram handle is @Irreverent_Nerds. They're on Facebook and YouTube as simply the Irreverent Nerds. Ugh, so pedantic. And of course, they are on your podcast app. If you listen on Spotify, scroll down and you will see a question. What did you think of this episode? They welcome your feedback, or so they told me. They also post episode-specific polls and questions from time to time, so please feel free to jump in and give them your 2 cents while they're still alive. All right, nerds, I've talked enough. Let's get back to this week's episode. It might be their last.
Maybe as a means of controlling her environment, to, just it became a very unhealthy way of her dealing with her own fear, and it's natural and understandable that she would reach for the explanation that she was most familiar with in regards to the events. Like, I think the same is true for some of the people that start following her. They were already familiar with religious imagery and things like that. So some of this was drawing parallels or seemed to be mirroring some of that. So it's like your brain needs a story. This thing is so terrible and so mysterious. Like, your brain needs a story to tell about it. Like, how can I explain what's happening? I need an explanation. And then she kind of seizes on that and then offers one and preaches it, and becomes basically a cult leader overnight.
Which that is understandable. What's not understandable is just how off her rocker she was.
Yeah,
but
and it says she's Mrs. Carmody, so I'm like, oh, poor Mr. Carmody. I was like, what's he going through? Like, where is he at? Because they never show him, like, her husband, but she's supposedly, maybe she might be a widow, but she's called Mrs. Carmody. I was like,
divorced, I'm sure.
I don't know. Normally you wouldn't still. Well, she seems like someone though that would still refer to herself maybe that way even after that. But yeah, there's never any mention of her husband, even though she's Mrs. Carmody, at least in the credits.
Right.
But yeah, she definitely snaps, and like I said, I think I like that they show that she was terrified herself, and she was clinging on to what she knew. But she also had this she already had this very self-righteous aspect of her personality in her character. She was, in a sense, like these crisis situations. You very much you're bringing into it you've already got baggage. You're already bringing all that in with you. So that was hers, and obviously I'm sure there's a long history behind that for her character. But yeah, she is. I mean, she's definitely, I think, probably the two. But it's interesting, and I liked this. Like you see two forms of hubris and harm that are happening. And I like, in a sense, it's two groups that are often pitted against one another in stories like this. But they're like, you have both the hubris of the scientists, and she was right about that. Like they're playing around with things they shouldn't have, and they were doing it in secret, trying to hide it from the general populace. They didn't ask anyone else's consent to do these things, other than maybe just the higher chain of command. But that should have been something that the people voted on, like the country voted on, or maybe even the world, like something that significant. But they're over here doing it in secret, trying to hide it.
Open up a black hole to an unknown universe.
Yeah, and so you have, they've done something horrible, it's in their arrogance, or like they did it because they could, and didn't spend enough time thinking whether they should. So they wreaked this havoc upon.
Said Ian Malcolm.
Yeah, like yeah, exactly. But then you also have obviously the hubris of Mrs. Carmody, in a sense she doesn't know that the military is involved initially, but as soon as she finds out, like she latches onto that and uses the scientists, and that just plays right in. She finds a way to play it right into her worldview, and then so you have. But I like that you like Stephen King and Frank Darabont, the writers. They're not exclusively attacking religion in this. They're showing they're showing like a very unhealthy version of it,
right? And
that might happen in a crisis situation. But they're also showing how science can really mess things up if they,
I appreciate that. A lot of things will go out of their way to, and there's nothing wrong with having a religious villain. There's nothing wrong with showing the dark, hideous underbelly of religion, because that does happen in real life. But they made sure to have a couple of characters that were religious or didn't have a problem necessarily with religion, but were calling her out. Amanda said, "This is a little too Old Testament for me," and another character said, "I believe in God, but I don't believe he's this bloodthirsty God you make him out to be."
Yeah.
So they were making sure not to alienate any potential audience or anything like that.
And then you have Irene, and I kind of like the fact that
that was the teacher, right?
Yeah, but she never says whether she's for or against religion. Like the film doesn't tell you.
Well, she makes a good point.
But she notices, like, this is harmful, what's going on right now with Mrs. Carmody. So she throws a can of peas at her head. She's like, I'm going to stone someone I'm mad at. That's in the Bible too, isn't it? Or how'd she put it? It's like I can stone someone I'm pissed off or something like that. She had some spunk.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you do have some people that stand up to her, like you said, which so I liked that. They maybe didn't go as far as they could have in showing, the more positive aspects that religion can have in those situations, but they still made some effort.
Yeah.
And I'm glad they did that.
Yeah, I mean, they could have shown some more positive influence. They could have had a Ned Flanders, but I don't think it would have served the plot. So I think that what they did do was fine.
Yeah, I think it worked. It felt pretty naturalistic in the sense, like in that situation, that you probably would only have a few people that would stand up to someone like that, because we humans want to avoid conflict, so it's probably not too many people. And obviously at the end, No, it's only when it's like becomes a dire necessity. But Ollie, stands up to her in the ultimate. I mean, he kills her. But at that point, she's calling for blood. Like there's 8 people, and all they want to do is leave. That's all they're trying to do is leave the store, and she's, calling on them to be killed. And
I guess they're threatening her control.
exactly, yeah, her control, and again for her, that's absolutely is driven by her fear. Like she's driven, I think, by arrogance as well, but arrogant self-righteousness, but fear, I think, more so for her. So she is also trying to control her environment, and this is where I think the film got really interesting, and I guess we're coming up. Yeah, we don't go too much longer, so maybe we can get into the ending some now, or kind of head that direction. Like, David is, he's kind of portrayed as like the hero. He's not perfect by far. Like at the beginning, when that first lady wants to go into the mist, and I don't know if anyone even died at that point, other than, you had the one man that Dan Miller was like, so and so, our neighbor, he just got pulled away, and but that's still kind of mysterious. No one saw anyone die. Even he didn't see exactly. You just know the person got pulled away, and there was blood. But there's still already some fear in there, and then the woman wants someone to come with her because she has to go back home to her 2 kids, and David is not willing to do it either, and it's understandable, because he has his son there, and he doesn't want to take a risk with his son. At least that's the reason he gives at the time. But then there's other risks that he takes later, that might have left his son, not necessarily an orphan, but like without a father, potentially. So you see some inconsistency even maybe in David. And he makes some decisions that end up costing some people their lives, and in each circumstance, so like, you can totally understand his reasoning and his reasons for it, but they end up still being costly decisions, and obviously as you get closer to the end, you see some pretty rough consequences to his decisions. So even though he didn't lead a cult, there's a sense in which his decisions, he was also trying to gain control of the situation, trying to find ways to deal with it, cost people their lives too. So I thought that was interesting that his character, he's not just this pure altruistic hero, spotless hero. It's like, no, he's very flawed.
Yeah.
So I think that felt realistic to me. How did you feel about it?
I felt that the ending of the film said a lot about Stephen King's worldview.
Oh, yeah?
Because most films, when you think about it, we haven't gotten into how the film ends yet. I'm going to try not to spoil that. But most films would have had the cavalry arrive just at the nick of time.
Yeah.
This one had a different ending.
Yeah.
I think this ending is more cynical, more realistic, maybe. They dared to do it. They dared to end the film in this way. Does that answer the question, or did I miss the question? What was the question?
I forget.
Okay, I forgot too.
It's okay. Yeah, because I got to thinking about the ending, and I guess we can go ahead and dive into it and kind of unpack it. Like, so let me see if I can narrate it here, and then we can dive into kind of the implications. But like you have the final standoff that we already referenced with Mrs. Carmody, where she's calling for the blood of maybe 6 or 7 people at that point. The only people that weren't all caught up in her cult at that point, and they're plotting to, they're making plans with each other as quietly as possible. They just want to get out and try to drive and see if they can get past the mist, basically. And so he has a Land Cruiser that's parked out in the parking lot, and their goal is to bring some food with them and then just to try to make it out to the Land Cruiser, and then just drive as far as they can drive and see if they can get past the mist, at least take a shot at it, knowing that it might not succeed, but like, we got to try something, basically, was the reasoning there. So after Ollie kills Mrs. Carmody, they're able to leave, and sadly, Ollie and a couple of the other people along with them get killed on the way out. And in the end, only 5 people make it to the Land Cruiser. But Ollie, like, as he gets killed, and he gets killed by the really big praying mantis. Like, it looks like a massive, like, reptilian praying mantis or something. It's like probably, I don't know, 2 stories tall or something like that. And it grabs him and pulls him up. But his gun falls down, and they make a point of showing you, like, his gun falls down on the hood of the Land Cruiser. And so David Drayton and his son Billy and Amanda, and then Irene and Dan are the only ones left that make it to the Land Cruiser. And then they get in, and David, you can see it on his face, like he's trying to decide whether to risk getting the gun. And the others realize what he's contemplating, and they urge him, like, don't do it, don't get the gun, don't try it. But in the end, he decides to do it. He opens the door, he reaches around, he gets the gun. And again, understandable risk, because, like, he's thinking, like, what if on our way down, like, one of these things gets in the car? I may need to shoot it so I can protect my son or protect the other people here. So it makes sense. Like, his choice to grab the gun made sense, even though he was being urged not to do it. And I think they were more doing that out of concern, maybe for his welfare, than anything else. But he takes the risk. He gets it. He gets in time. Bug does fly up against the windshield, but doesn't get in. And then they're able to drive away. And then and I think this is predictable. Like, I saw this coming, but I saw this part coming, but I didn't see the ending coming.
Yeah.
Like, the final ending, I did not see that coming. But this part I did see coming quite a ways back. Like, I knew with almost certainty that his wife was going to be dead.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that, they stopped by the house, where she had stayed there while he and Billy went to get the supplies. And we find out that she has been killed by the bugs, it appears, and then hung up. She's, like, hanging up underneath the eaves of the house, all wrapped up in the spider web. And it seems obvious that she's dead at that point, and most likely, has the eggs or whatever inside of her. But she's dead. And it's too dangerous, obviously, for them to get out and try and check whether she's dead, because then the rest of them would die too, or at least whoever got out would die. So they come there and they find that scene, and David, to some extent blames himself, or maybe not blames himself so much as he bemoans the fact. He's like, I was gonna fix the window. I think his first thought was, like, they got in through the window that broke earlier. And obviously he didn't have a chance or time to do that because the mist came down on him before he even got back out of town. But he can't think of anything else to say. He's just like, I was going to fix the window. It's my grandfather's tree, and then he weeps there for a moment, and then, they move on, but obviously he's gone through all those horrible things. He's seen people die. He's been responsible to some extent for people dying and making choices that led to people's deaths. So he's seen a lot, and then finds his wife dead. So he's on the edge of despair already, but he's holding on to hope. They're holding on to hope that maybe they can make it further. So they keep driving, and and we see some scenes of that, and the music kind of comes in and is kind of this haunting choral notes, and we see this massive, and I think this adds to the despair at the end, I think, as well. It's like probably as big as like a 6 or 7 story building. This massive creature, I don't even know what to call it, like reptilian bug thing. I mean, it's just
with tentacles on its underbelly.
Yeah, it's just huge, and it walks past, and it's like shaking the earth as it walks past, and it doesn't really even notice them, but they're like, I can't help. I'm sure that just added to the, oh man, look at what we're up against. These things are, if there's ones this big out there, what can we do? but they keep going, and then they run out of gas. And here's where, you know, the mist is still all around them. At this point, they haven't seen any other humans alive, and certainly not, like, no military presence, nothing, like, no one alive up to this point in their drivings. So you have all that, and you have the weight of despair. And here's where kind of the fateful choice that David made to grab the gun, you know, really comes in a horrible way. Like he's sitting there, and I don't know if he had a thought about that. We don't really know whether he had a thought about that when he grabbed it initially. You get a little hint that maybe that crossed his mind back when they were still in the parking lot, but we don't really know. The story doesn't really tell us for sure. But he grabs the gun, and you can see it processing in his mind. He's thinking about, it's like, well, rather than go through all the horrible ways that we've seen people die already, maybe we should just kill ourselves. So he's thinking through that, and then we see him. He doesn't say anything, but we see him look both Irene and Dan in the eye, and they understand what he is thinking, and they both nod their assent. And more or less, Amanda does as well, although she does so with tears and kind of a wide-eyed, fearful look. So they've kind of all resigned themselves to, like, oh, you know, there's no rescue. You know, we don't want to die the way that we've seen so many other people die. We want it to be more quick and painless. So with the exception of his son, obviously, the other adults, you know, they give their consent to his plan, and he checks the gun, and there's only 4 rounds left. And so he looks at Amanda, and he's like, I'll figure something out. And I'm glad they didn't show this up close, but they cut to the outside of the vehicle, and you just see the flash of the gun, and you hear the gun. Obviously, you hear the flash. And so I think he shot his son first because he didn't want his son to see the other people get shot. But the most gut-wrenching part of the whole movie, like, his son wakes up and turns to look at him right before he does it, and it's horrible, just gut-wrenching. And so he kills the other 4 people in the car, and then he just lets out this guttural, like, this cry of pain, just like, it's just like, what else could I do? Like, and he even tries to shoot himself, even though he knows there's no bullets left. He puts it in his mouth as if to try and shoot himself, and knows that he can't. So he gets out of the car, and he's like willing the creatures to come and kill him. He's like, and he yells, he's like, come on. It's like, come on. Like, he wants to die now because there's nothing left to live for in his thinking. And this is where you get the final gut punch, if you will, the film. Like, as he's there willing the creatures to come, and you even hear some of them off in the distance, but then out of the mist, instead of a creature, comes a massive tank. And then another tank comes, and we see the military is coming in, and then we see, you know, and this is really a kicker too, like, we see a truck come with civilians, and then the woman that had left at the very beginning is there with her 2 kids. And he has just killed his own son as well as the other adults there. And had he waited, like, literally, you know, 5 minutes or even less, he would have seen the military, and they would have been rescued, or at least would have had the assistance of the military. And he just falls to his knees. He just can't believe it, you know, what he's done, and how, and he just says, all dead, just why? And then lets out another scream. And that's how the movie ends. Now it's like, gut punch. So
now, we had discussed it earlier. I had to decompress for an entire hour after that ending, My wife told me after we watched it, she couldn't sleep that night.
Mm.
And she told me this morning, that I wasn't allowed to watch any more horror films for our podcast at the house, or at least not with her.
That's understandable.
So, how did it affect you? I think you told me that you had to decompress a little too.
Yeah, I think I was quiet for the first probably 10 minutes after it ended. I just like sat there, and but I started processing it by writing about it. You know, as I sat there, I started writing because I knew, I was like, this is the perfect time to write and process this. Like, I didn't know it was gonna end. Like, I had no idea. Laura could kind of see it coming a little bit, and she looked up the ending, and then saw what was gonna happen, and she kind of reacted, and I was like, don't tell me. Like, I want to know. Like, I want to find it out. But yeah, it was rough. Like, let me see, I can maybe share some of what I wrote afterwards.
While you're looking that up, I was gonna say, I mentioned earlier that there's something I could make fun of in this film, and that was the CGI. But otherwise, you're right. It's just not a movie that has a lot to make fun of.
So here's some of the things that I wrote afterwards. It's like, the ending just guts you. Damn, they gave up way too quickly. And then I had a thought. It's like, this film might actually be too serious for our podcast.
Yeah,
because we are the Irreverent Nerds.
Enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did too. Yeah. Absolutely. I was like, it's not really much we can joke about with this, but maybe that's okay. You know, it's like okay to have a really serious episode from time to time, but I was like, damn, it gets very real. Faced with unknown dangers, how do people react? Some with fear, some show kindness. The power of hope. Here's another note I put. The power of hope can lead to even greater despair. You might almost call hope an enemy in this film, at least towards the end. Like, there's almost a sense in which it was an enemy of David Drayton and the small group there. Because it kept them going, but then in the end, that made the despair that much deeper.
Yes.
You know, which I guess is always the maybe not the downside, but the flip side of hope. That if you hold on to it too tightly, if you're disappointed, like, the despair can be that much greater. So sometimes it begs the question, like, is it worth it to hope? You know, if you know that you might be disappointed, and I think the answer is yes, but it's not always an easy yes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, like, yeah, I think after that, I just kind of reflected more on the film as a whole. You know, some of the things we've already talked about, and but yeah, did you have any more thoughts on the ending? Like, I did definitely, like, had I seen this before I had kids, it still would have hit me hard, but it definitely hits differently having kids of my own. Like,
which is something I don't share that experience with you.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine how that makes you feel.
Man, just the thought of, like, being in a place where you would contemplate, you know, doing that to, you know, any one of your children's lives, you know, and the thinking would be like to avoid them experiencing the horrible death that the other people you'd seen die experienced, not wanting them to go through that, you know, but still I was like, wow, I think I would have waited longer before, you know, but then I would have been afraid to wait longer too at the same time, because, like, at any moment, you know, a creature could come up and then, you know, they would experience a much more painful death. So it's like, but it seems like it would have, had he been thinking clearly, the better thing would have been, I'm going to wait until that does happen. And if I have to, rather than seeing him go through like death by one of the spiders, it's horrible, like, or one of the others, like, rather than seeing him go through that, then like kind of a mercy killing almost, but still, it's just like, I can't. It's, oof. Yeah, it's super heavy, but yeah, it's like you said, they dared to go there, and it is like, I appreciated their willingness to do that, because there are things that happen in the real world where it's like there's no good explanation for it. Like, it's like, why? Like, why is this suffering happening? Like, why? And you could have an answer, like even as like, even if your answer is God has a plan, you don't know what that is. So there's still this like why hanging out there,
right?
At the very least, until the end of your earthly life, if you will. There's this agonizing why. When I can only imagine, like, having not gone through anything that horrible myself, like, but I know things like that do happen where it just seems inexplicable, just the horrors, like the Holocaust. I mean, for instance, and that was something we perpetrated on each other.
Yeah.
But, and in a sense, this was the result of human, decisions as well. In a sense, this was perpetrated upon, maybe not as actively, obviously, but like still, once again, scientific and military hubris, and not quite the same, obviously, but yeah, but even tragedies like, seeing a kid get cancer and die of cancer or things like that, it's just like, what do you do with that? That kind of seemingly senseless tragedy, so yeah, that, and I think even in the past, when I was a Christian, like, I wouldn't have had an easy answer for that, other than it's like, but all you can do is say, well, I think God has a plan, but then you don't know what it is, so you can't really say much beyond that.
Right.
So it's like, you still are kind of left wrestling with the,
it's a plea towards blind trust.
With the pain,
Right. And the best answer I could give is, we live in a broken world. That's not a satisfying answer. Why do we live in a broken world? I could give a religious reason for that, but it's still not an answer. It's a fact that the world is a messed up place, but it's not a satisfactory answer as to why this is happening.
Yeah, I mean, there is some answer to his plea of why. I mean, like in this story, and even to some extent, like the Christian explanation would also be similar, in a sense of like, we messed it up. It's our fault. We. I mean, that's kind of the theme of, the doctrine of the fall, right? It's like we fucked it up. We sinned. We brought a curse upon all of humanity and the entire universe.
I'd like to accuse the serpent a little bit there too, but yeah.
Yeah, obviously he was involved as well, but so he was an intelligent agent who had a will involved in that as well. But Adam, I mean, humans are the one held responsible at the end of the day for it. But in this case, in this story, you have like the scientists and the military leaders who approved what they were doing. They brought all this pain and death and destruction upon other humans. And they couldn't have. I mean, they should have, been able to foresee the possibility of that, but didn't fully know what could happen. But yeah, but in their case, I think it was maybe far more deliberate, but yeah, but there is an answer. He's like, all this death, why? It's maybe not have a cosmic answer, but the boots on the ground answer is like it's the scientist's fault and the military leaders who approved it or sanctioned it or ordered it, whatever the case might be. But it's those people brought this upon.
Right. And those are facts, but they might not be a satisfactory answer.
Yeah. And maybe in some sense David was even asking, why did I do that? Why did I make that decision?
Yeah.
Why?
That's how I understood it anyway.
Maybe that was in there too, and not necessarily like a cosmic why, but like, but why? Like, why did I, all this, they're all dead for what? Obviously he didn't know that the military was going to come up, but he also didn't wait very long, to find out. So that's just very tragic.
Very tragic.
Yeah. But yeah, I think getting back to just the overall themes, it seemed to me, I don't know how you felt, but it seemed to me that choices were kind of one of the biggest themes in it, like the choices that people make, obviously within a crisis situation, but like that seemed to me like a pretty heavy, and it was like the monsters in the mist was really more of just a catalyst for the human drama that unfolded, like you said, like with
absolutely,
and that seemed very much to have been the intent, but yeah, what were some of the themes that you noticed that you felt were significant to the film?
Well, as far as I can tell, mostly just what we're talking about right now. That this was really just Stephen King's way of exploring how far humanity can plunge given in a catastrophe. I think that the monsters, these alien animals, were only created to, like you said, in order to bring an interesting science fiction horror element that would be the catalyst for what the true reason he wrote the story for. I'm not sure if there was any sort of agenda with Lady Carmody or not. I'm not sure why he chose a cult leader. Maybe he just needed some sort of charismatic character that would rally the people towards bad decisions.
Well, one thing I do know, and this is actually something I wrote in preparing, it's like one thing I do know, or at least suspect about Stephen King, like having spent a decent amount of time with his works, is that he's not a fan of religious fanaticism, and that does pop up. Characters like that, like there's just very arrogant, self-righteous religious characters do pop up quite a bit, in my experience in his stories. And obviously the character of Mrs. Carmody is no exception to that. So through her, King and Darabont, they get to explore the role religion can play in a situation of great distress. The majority of the characters do not refer much to religion until Mrs. Carmody begins to become more vocal and begins to gain a following. People will turn to anyone who offers a solution during a time of crisis, one of the characters observed. That, I think, was David. This comment comes in the midst of a discussion about the effect human nature has on behaviors during crisis situations. So yeah, but just getting back to Stephen King, I think that is something that he has a very strong distaste for.
Okay.
I don't know. He may be a little bit more like that.
It worked, though. It worked in the film.
I don't know where he stands. Like, I don't know if he identifies as an atheist or my guess would be he might be more in the agnostic realm of things, but I'm not entirely sure. But I do know he definitely has a distaste for, like, kind of like the more fanatical or like hellfire and brimstone kind of version,
right?
As do you and I. Like I
right.
did as even as a Christian as well. Like I had a distaste for that, and like that. I'm glad I didn't grow up in that strand of because that's just so much trauma out of that. But yeah, that is something that will pop up, not in every book that I've read or in every story that he writes, but it definitely pops up from time to time. And you don't necessarily see. Yeah, it does, and obviously there are people out in the real world like that too, and I'm guessing he's known a few of them over the years. Because most writers, they base their, especially their most interesting characters, are grounded in people that they've actually known and met. So there's at least inspiration often drawn from their real life experiences.
As a comic book author, I can agree with this. It's a lot easier to write characters based on people you know, or people's personalities.
Comes off more genuine as well. I mean, which makes sense. As people you've actually known, and as long as you're not straight up like putting that person in the. Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, Joe Smith. I knew him for 5 years, and my character's name was Joe Smith. It's like
I'm gonna have him get eaten first.
You want to do one of those that the names of the people in the story have been changed to protect the innocent, or whatever,
and the guilty,
and the guilty. But anyway, we should wrap this up. But yeah, this, like I said earlier, I'm not gonna go into all the different reasons, but I thought it started a little slow, but it definitely pulls you in, and I rate this pretty high. I think I give this 4.5 nerd hats. How about you? How did you feel?
I'm gonna give it a 4 hats. 4 nerd hats. I loved the film. The only thing I didn't like was the ending, but they dared to do it, and it does have an impact. So I'm not lowering my score because of that. I'm lowering my score because of I thought the CGI was not entirely convincing in some parts.
Yeah.
But it was a great film. And my wife wanted me to tell everybody that she didn't like it,
which is totally fine.
But she claims to be a big Stephen King movie fan, or at least from her past before her and I met.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really know this, but
okay.
Mandy does like horror films to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
Final Destination, the Halloween Michael Myers films.
Oh yeah, that's right. I've heard her talk about that a few times. I think. Yeah.
But apparently, the scariest thing in the entire movie was David shooting Billy.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
just gut wrenching. Yeah. Yeah, it's. I'm not planning to rewatch it anytime soon.
If I do, I might skip the ending.
Yeah, it's kind of like you've seen it once. It's like, I don't know if I need to be gut punched again. It's like you don't be gut punched so many times. That's kind of like there's a few other movies like that. Now this I think is maybe a little more rewatchable than some, but like I think like The Passion of the Christ being an example. I think I've only revisited that once because I had to for class in college. And that's the only other time I've watched it since I saw it in theaters, and I used to own it. I think I might still have it somewhere.
So at our
but
Bible
I've never
college,
rewatched it.
At our Bible college that thought cinema was the devil, they actually made you rewatch it.
Well, I don't know. They didn't necessarily think cinema was the devil. But
I'm exaggerating.
Yeah. I know. But there was a rule when we first started there. Obviously, you couldn't go to theaters, which they gradually have relaxed over the years.
Right.
And I think rightfully so. I think they should have. But yeah, that was, I think, officially, I think The Passion of the Christ was the first film that they gave. Maybe not. There might have been a few others, like maybe like a Saving Private Ryan or something like that, like historical value.
Oh, okay.
In terms of giving approval for people to go to the theater. But I'm sure they had watched films in classes, I think this was actually for the life of Christ. So it was a study of the life of Christ. So it fit within the class, but then we watched it on VHS. The school didn't have a DVD player, I guess.
Oh well.
Wasn't that advanced yet, but or
No.
maybe it was just that room didn't have one. But yeah, that's the last time. That would have been like 2004, or well, maybe 2005. It was the last time I ever watched it. But that's one of those that like gut punches you, you know, like the flogging scene is the worst in that film. And yeah, I have not had an inclination in the many years since to rewatch. Every now and then
I haven't either.
Like I've thought about it, like on a Good Friday or something. Every now and then, it's like make myself go through it, but then I just never could do it. But yeah, this ending was kind of like the flogging scene there, where it was like it just gut punch. Like, and that one I knew what was coming. I'd even heard about the flogging scene, but still. And I think that's our cue.
I think it is.
Well, nerds, next week we're going to be joined by Dan and Chris coming on to talk about the state of comics in general, but also their favorite horror comics, or at least some horror comics that they recommend. And Will and I are going to bring a few to bear as well. And so that's coming next week. And then week 3, we're going to be covering a horror anime.
Oh yeah,
And,
yeah. We figured that out yet?
Still talking to the guest, so in fact I need to check back in with him and see. It is a he. Need to check back in with him and see if he's available and wants to do that. But at the very least, he may have given us our topic at the very least. So, but it'll be something in the anime realm that is a horror film or horror series of some type. And then we'll finish off the month with.
Ooh, are we gonna do it?
Yeah.
We'll
No.
finish off the month with Army of Darkness.
Should we do a dual feature? Like try to cover both? What do you
I'd
think?
like to, but if we
could
have
give
to
it a
only-
shot.
If we only cover one,
Movies of the month.
yeah. If we only cover one, maybe Army of Darkness. But
But yeah, either both of those films or Army of Darkness. We will cover those to finish out horror month, and then November is going to be. November is going to be Miyazaki month. So, but anyway, until next week, nerds, live long and prosper.
Sayonara.
Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Irreverent Nerds podcast. If you would, consider following us on Instagram. We are there at irreverent_nerds. You can also hit us up on Facebook. Just look us up there at the Irreverent Nerds. That's our fan page. We have a YouTube channel as well. Once again, the Irreverent Nerds. Nice and simple, right? And if you go to www.irreverentnerds.com, that will send you to our Podcasters for Spotify, formerly Anchor.fm profile, where you can send us a voice message if you want to, you can support us financially, or listen to the podcast. It will also direct you to other places you can listen, like Spotify, Apple, Google, Stitcher, you name it. So, like, comment, subscribe, follow, all those good things, wherever you find us, wherever you listen to us, we would greatly appreciate it. Until next time, nerds, live long and prosper. Avengers assemble! I'm Batman.